I want to begin by asking for a shout out, the 11th Airborne Division Band. They're doing a great job. How about a round of applause for them? Great job, you guys. Now, you know, Memorial Day in Alaska means so much. We have more veterans and military members per capita than any other state in the country. That's something, thank you. That's something we should all be proud of. Very, very proud of. But that also means we know firsthand of the sacrifice of our brothers and sisters in the armed services have made to protect our great nation and our freedoms. I will tell you one of the most moving things that I've seen while serving as your U.S. Senator is how much Alaska communities all over our state, from the biggest cities to the smallest villages, support our military and support our veterans. It is a special, unique aspect of who we are as Alaskans. It is embedded in our DNA, and we see it particularly on important days like today. Let me give you a few examples. A few years ago, I was in a meeting of community leaders, elected leaders in Delta, not too far from here, discussing their support for our soldiers at Fort Greely. We're having this meeting, and all of a sudden, somebody from the U.S. Air Force, one of our great F-35 pilots, decided to come in low and very fast. Big sonic boom, shook the whole building. Every car in the parking lot's alarm went off. And as you guys know, and I guarantee you, if something like that would have happened in the lower 48, the vast majority of the communities in the lower 48 would have had the mayor, the assembly members, calling the Air Force, complaining like crazy. I'll never forget the mayor of Delta just looked at me like nothing happened, and he just responded, there you go again, the sound of freedom, right? And it was the sound of freedom. Now, this is not just a recent phenomenon in Alaska. In 1942, during World War II, Alaskans oversubscribed their war bond quota by more than 300%. No other place in the country was supporting the war effort with war bonds more than our great state, which wasn't even a state back then. And of course, there is the great community of Fairbanks and North Pole. Such incredible support for our military. I love the big monument at Griffin Park commemorating the Lend-Lease program that brought Russian and Alaskan pilots together right here to help win World War II. And whenever the military has a need or doesn't know what they need, because we know sometimes, the communities here in the interior come together and make the case. Saving the F-16s, making sure the F-35s are Eielson, welcoming the new stood-up U.S. 11th Airborne Division, welcoming members of the military, Fairbanks, North Pole. We are truly the golden heart of patriotism, and I want to thank all of you with a round of applause for that. Memorial Day is an important opportunity to reflect upon how we honor our military and their sacrifices, particularly the ultimate sacrifice over the decades. Now, we've always lionized our World War II veterans. As was earlier mentioned, over 400,000 Americans gave their lives so that we could defeat tyranny around the world and defend freedom. We actually had a World War II veteran at one of our ceremonies this morning from Fairbanks, 105 years old, still looking strong this morning. We still have World War II veterans, and we've always lionized them. Then came the Korean War, and we began to see a bit of a decline from the level of respect that we had for World War II veterans. As a nation, even the name, the Forgotten War, is some kind of benign neglect. Never liked that name. And then, of course, came the Vietnam War. And we all know what happened, but to this day, we don't know really why it happened. Our country went off kilter. in the respect given to our service members and those killed in action hit rock bottom as a society. But this is something that remarkable that happened in our nation. Instead of being racked and incapacitated by bitter and anger, our Vietnam veterans set out to make sure that future veterans of American wars and their fallen comrades would receive better treatment than they had, that Americans would once again honor military service and veterans and war dead like we had after World War II. And here's the wonderful and remarkable thing, particularly for our Vietnam veterans. They succeeded in this noble mission. When you look at how our communities come together and honor our military, particularly our fallen, it's back at that high level that we had after World War II. So if you are a veteran of any war or any era, Vietnam, World War II, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, Panama, Bosnia, or a family member of one of those veterans, could you please stand or raise your hand and be recognized? How about a round of applause for all of those, please? And family. Now we know that that with service comes sacrifice. And it's not just the ultimate sacrifice in war, which we honor today. We also honor those killed in training for war. Like Colonel Watts mentioned, the brave soldiers we lost in the recent Apache accident. There's also the sacrifice of family members who have lost loved ones in defending our nation, who still live with wounds that will never really heal. We all know stories and have our family histories, particularly in Alaska, that weave together this fabric of American sacrifice. I grew up hearing stories in my family about my 5 uncles and great-uncles who fought in World War II. My great-grandmother proudly displayed 4 blue stars in the front window of her home. All of my uncles came home, but one in particular never really escaped the horrors of the horrendous combat that he experienced. But there was another Sullivan family during World War II that was not so fortunate. And I'm reminded of their enormous sacrifice every time I am in Juneau. There's a plaque in the harbor in Juneau listing by name the hundreds of sailors killed in action when the USS Juneau was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine, and almost all aboard perished, including the 5 Sullivan brothers. The story goes that the U.S. Navy sent a Navy captain and a chaplain and a doctor to the Sullivan farm in Iowa to break the news. The captain told Mr. Sullivan, "I'm here with some tragic news about your sons." "Which one?" Mr. Sullivan asked. "I'm terribly sorry," the captain replied. "All 5. Think of that. 5 brothers, 1 family, 1 mother, 1 father for our country. That is the kind of sacrifice we honor today. So I'd like to conclude with a sobering and also a comforting thought on this solemn day. First, the sobering. The sacrifices we honor today are going to continue. Today, we have very significant national security challenges facing our nation, particularly the rise of brutal, aggressive, expansionist dictatorships in China and Russia. History is repeating itself. But here's the comforting thought, and as Alaskans, we instinctively know this. We still have the best military in the world who volunteer to keep our nation safe no matter the costs. I just returned from a week of Marine Corps Reserve duty out at Marine Forces Pacific Command. And just like here in Alaska, I saw the best and brightest and bravest that our nation has to offer. Young men and women training for very difficult missions, in executing real-world operations every day, doing their duty to keep us free. Their service and the ultimate sacrifice that we honor on Memorial Day reminds us that we truly live in an exceptional nation, that America is an exceptional country. Not only have the honored dead we recognize today kept us free at home, our military over the decades has done more to liberate men and women across the globe from tyranny and oppression, literally hundreds of millions of people, than any other force in human history. The inscription at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. sums this up succinctly. Quote, "Americans came to liberate, not conquer, to restore freedom, and to end tyranny." Think about that. What other great country or great power in the world can say that? Certainly not Russia, certainly not China. Every American veteran, every Gold Star family, every sacrifice that has been made by the men and women who wear our uniform, dating back to our nation's founding up until today, are part of this legacy of liberation and freedom. The 3 soldiers at this community recent loss in the Apache helicopter crash are part of this legacy. The young man's memory that we will shortly be honoring, Army Ranger Sergeant Clarkson and his family, are part of this legacy. Sergeant Clarkson was on his 5th deployment in support of the War on Terror when he made the ultimate sacrifice for his country. We'll be hearing more about this hero and the tribute to him, but I want to read a few lines that I believe summed up his life that were in his obituary. Quote, "If one word could describe Joel, it was passion. In youth, his passions included taekwondo, football, soccer, ROTC, Shakespeare, and fishing with family and friends in Prince William Sound. As an adult, his passions were God, country, and the soldiers that served with him." The story of Sergeant Clarkson calls to mind the words of President Reagan in 1985 after placing a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier that I'll conclude with. Here's what President Reagan said. "If words cannot repay the debt we owe these men and women, surely with our actions we must strive to keep faith with them and with the vision that led them to battle and their final sacrifice. Our first obligation to them and ourselves is plain enough. The United States and the freedom for which it stands, the freedom for which they died, must endure and prosper. Their lives remind us that freedom is not bought cheaply. It has a cost. It imposes a burden. And just as they, whom we commemorate, were willing to sacrifice so much, so too must we, in a less final, less heroic way, be willing to give ourselves in service of our nation. God bless our fallen heroes and our veterans and their families on this very important day for our country. Thank you.